Hello, everyone. Today, going to be talking about the fourth book of the Wheel of Time, The Shadow Rising by Robert Jordan. Um, Start off by saying that likely there will be spoilers for the book. Actually, guaranteed there'll be spoilers for the book as I go through. There's just no way for me to really talk about it in the depth I want to. If you are at this point in the series and you're like wondering, oh, should I read further? Should I keep going with the Wheel of Time after book three? Yes, please. I really think that book four, for me, what I always say is book four is kind of where the Wheel of Time begins for me. Like the first three books are good, they have a lot of setups, a lot of good elements. We get introduced to the character, but Jordan's style changes in book four and is a bit more like lets the characters do what the characters should be. He lets the plot line separate a little bit, allows each story to kind of naturally keep going without like forcing them back together. So I really enjoy that with this book. This is definitely one of my favorite books in the series. There's a lot of good parts in it. So yes, you should read this book. Now, if you don't like this book, then you know maybe it's not for you. That's totally cool. I understand. So, but just want everyone to know that there will be spoilers in this just review for it. So let's start off with the pros of the book, like best moments, things that are done well in this book. So I already kind of talked about it in my pre-speech for this part, but this book, Jordan does what I've been kind of complaining about the last couple books, which is he finally lets the characters do what they need to do. He doesn't force the girls to come back in at the plot line, at the end of the book to be in the concluding section. He lets each of the characters be in their own concluding space and lets the story flow out that way instead of forcing it and jamming it back together. And that is what I've been desperately hoping for so many books. This is my third time reading through the series, so I kind of knew this was coming. I was anticipating this, and I really enjoy this a lot. Now, um, some really big positives for the book. I think that the best storyline in this book, and people will probably argue with me, but that's okay. That's why we're here to discuss and talk about it. But my favorite is Perrin's arc in this book. I think that it is some of the most. He's dedicated quite a bit of time in this book, and there's so much depth to it and emotion. And we get to go back and see the two rivers again, which is super exciting. His relationship with Fail, I feel, is very much, given more depth in this book, especially. They feel like a real couple, and there are elements to it that I don't particularly like, but we'll get into those into the critiques. But I gotta say, like the two rivers battle for the two river, well, for Emmons Field and stuff like that, where you know the White Cloaks abandon them, and Perrin is like holding out the women for the two rivers are fighting too with the men, and like they're fighting off these hordes of Trollocs, and then the rest of the two rivers comes to their aid and flanks the Trollocs from both sides. Oh, it's so good, and it's so good to see like the moment with Fail bringing back, um, like Perrin's reputation kind of preceding him, and her bringing back help to not let him die, even though she knows what he's doing for her. He's trying to get her out so that she won't die. There's just a lot of like sweet moments with those scenes, and so good. I love it. I love getting to go back and see places that we've been to before and kind of see how, especially with the Perrin being from the outside coming back in, seeing how things have changed a little bit in the Two Rivers, but seeing how he has changed by being out in the world and coming back and experiencing, this his childhood world again in a different lens. Um, Another great moment from this is, and not great and as in happy, but like just emotional, is the moment when he finally gets back and he finds out that his entire family is dead. Really, just like the way, I mean, it might be, I listen to the audiobooks most of the time. I really enjoy listening to audiobooks. I think that they're just my preferred way. um but there's just, it might be the narrator that does it, but there's just so much emotion in that scene, and it gets me almost every single time. I absolutely, like, I don't want to say I love that scene. I love that scene as in a writing sense, but it's like, it's heartbreaking. And it ties into the end when he finds out that this messenger boy who's been kind of like running around in the background is like a distant cousin of his, and it like it. Oh, there's so many like good tie-ins. It's so good. I love it. I love that storyline so much, and it really, for me, I think Fail is like one of my favorite characters from this book. I think that she is like more well developed here, and I like seeing the two of them bounce off of each other. And I think they work well together as, not only as like a romantic couple, but just as two characters bouncing back and forth. So I also really enjoy all the stuff with Rand and Matt and going into the Waste. I think it's really cool to get to see the Aiel and their culture and get to explore that a little bit more. And I love what Jordan does, where he will have two cultures, and like we are experiencing, our perspective of normal is from Rand in the Two River culture, basically. But it's interesting to see how he does it, where he basically has both the Two Rivers, like Egwene and Rand especially, talking with like Avienda and like kind of talking about the culture differences, and not having the culture that we see as outside have them see themselves as outsiders. They see themselves as like, no, you're weird for believing in this. Well, why does this doesn't make any sense? Why do you do this way? And it feels believable and real. And that's because like a character who's in a different culture would not see their culture as different. It's their culture. They understand it. That's what they grew up in. That's where all their perspective is from. And I think Jordan does a good job of keeping in mind where characters are from and allowing that to influence their character, and give us like this new perspective we can view the world from. And I really, really, really like it a lot. I think that with Matt especially, I really like the doorway scenes, both of them. I think they're really good. I part of some of my favorite moments, but there's, I love Matt's character. I also really think that Rand pulling his trap at the end is very interesting. I know there's a bit of, and I've talked about this with some friends, but and in our Drink and Discuss, which will probably come out before this video does, there is this, this element of not letting the reader in on what's going on that I think made some people that I've talked to like not like it as much, but I kind of enjoyed that aspect a little bit. But that also could be because I've read this book multiple times, and so I knew what to expect and I knew the setups for it. So, critiques. Perrin and Fail's bickering at the beginning is kind of annoying. I understand it for their characters. I didn't mind it as much on this read through, but I definitely knew, like on my first read through, I think it was really, really annoying that they had like this, like, not being able. Jordan does this thing where he like intentionally has characters miscommunicate to add tension and conflict, and sometimes it works, but a lot of the times it doesn't because it just feels like fabricated conflict and stakes. And so this one wasn't as bad as like book 2 with Rand and Perrin and Matt and their bickering of like not being able to understand each other. But there's definitely a few parts that I was just like, okay, can we please just get over this? Thank you. Um, the other, I don't want to say this is like a hard critique, but it is a little critique, and I understand why it's done this way, which is the beginning of the book is really slow. Um, it's probably some of the slowest sequencing and pacing that I've seen in the Wheel of Time. I'm trying to remember I think there are more elements of that kind of slowness in the coming books in the middle of the series, but I understand why it's done because there's so much setup that is done within the first couple chapters of the series. But there is definitely, it can be hard, I think, for a reader coming in from book 3 being like, okay, can we get on to the next thing, please? Can we speed this along a little bit? And since I've read Cradle relatively recently in conjunction with this book, it's definitely like jarring to have like Cradle pacing, which is ridiculously fast, and then Wheel of Time pacing, which is ridiculously slow at some points. So that can be that could be part of it too. But I definitely think there is a little bit of a hump to get over at the beginning of this book before it starts getting into like really interesting stuff. But I understand why, because you need to move the pieces away from each other and start these new plot lines and set up these new elements of what to expect as we move forward through this book and through the rest of the series. Nynaeve and Elaine's plot in this book in Tanchico, there are some good moments in it. I really like the fight with Mogideon, but most of it I could care less about. I think that their chapters are some of the slowest chapters, and I think it's because I don't feel like Nynaeve is a very good character until later in the series. And I know that she does get better, which is why I tolerate it up to this point. I know I have some people who are like absolutely cannot stand her, but I don't mind her as much because I know where the payoff's going to be in the long term. But it is, I don't know. I think it is it's a little annoying to deal with. It's book 4 at this point, and she still kind of feels like very hypocritical. I know that's part of her personality. She's a little bit of a hypocrite at some points, but there's definitely elements of like, can we move on? And I still believe strongly that most of that comes from us not understanding where she comes from, not understanding, like, not being given enough of her internal thoughts about her past to understand why she is the way she is. So, and I know people have said there's like few hints, especially in book 1 and stuff like that, but hints are not enough in this aspect. We need more depth to her that is apparent. It can't be like trying to piece things together. We need to understand why she does things the way she does. And I don't, even on my third read through of this, I still don't think there is enough here in the first 4 books to justify a lot of her actions. A lot of times it feels like it's more about her doing what's needed for the plot to move forward rather than her doing what makes sense necessarily for her character. So I think that's one point where Jordan has kind of missed the mark a little bit. Now, Elaine is a little bit better, and I like her character quite a bit more, especially I think about the scene, the scene where she gets drunk in this book. And I actually really enjoy that scene specifically. I like that scene a lot, and I think that gives us a lot of insight into some of her struggles, and I'd like more, but I can understand that at this point because she hasn't really been a perspective character very much up to this point in the series. So, I'm at a little bit longer than I anticipated for this one, but I do really think that this is where the Wheel of Time starts getting good. I don't want to say good. Gets like great. This is where I start to really find myself getting sucked into the world and these stories of these characters. So I personally have this book is, I think, one of my favorites in the series. It's not my favorite. I think that'd be like probably near the end. Book 13 or 14 would probably be my favorite. But this definitely has a high place on my list, and I really, really like this book. And I like the books coming. I'm excited to discuss and talk about the books coming up as well, because there's a lot of moments that I'm excited to get to go back and experience again. But that'll be it for this video. As always, if you agree or disagree with me, go ahead, post comments down below. Love to talk to you guys. Love to, hash it out, get some different opinions. Just because we don't agree doesn't mean that either of us are wrong. We all have different perspectives on it, and I enjoy hearing those and discussing those. I have my own thoughts. You have your own thoughts. I'm happy to talk about them, okay? And then be sure to like and subscribe if you like the video. I really appreciate it, and it helps out the channel a lot. So, thank you for watching.